Hey everyone! Tonight we're drifting back to a quiet corner of the world. A place not marked on any map, yet familiar in the way that hardship often is. Softly pressing, unnoticed at first, then impossible to ignore. Let's settle in. Dim the lights. Maybe stretch a little, letting the day's small anxieties melt into the quiet hum of the night. Because tonight we're not chasing wars or crowns. No, tonight we're drifting along with a family that lost almost everything, except each other, and perhaps a whisper of hope. Picture it. A small, modest home, barely more than a shelter. Its walls were thin, and the roof, well, it wasn't exactly prepared for a flood. Naturally, floods aren't very considerate, and so, on a damp morning, when the river crept higher than it should have, the little home of this poor family was claimed by the water. The father, mother, a young boy, and a girl, probably not more than 10, found themselves staring at the remnants of what was, now merely a memory bobbing gently in the currents. Sitting under a tree, which was only slightly more useful than their washed-away walls, the family let themselves cry. The father, broad-shouldered but visibly shrunken, kept his hands in his lap. He blamed himself. Of course he did. Fathers tend to do that in stories like this. They carry invisible weights, and when the world itself turns on them, the weight grows heavier. He could have perhaps raised the embankment. Perhaps he could have reinforced the roof. Perhaps maybe he should have been more alert. And so, in his mind, he failed. That's what fathers do in small tragedies. They fail first. The mother, on the other hand, had mastered the art of quiet comfort. She swept her gaze over the children, coaxing, whispering, "It's all right. We have each other. That's all that matters." And, of course, she was right, but sometimes right is as heavy as wrong because it requires belief when belief is the last thing you feel capable of holding. The children, shivering from wet clothes and cold wind, clung to her words, though their tears continued to fall, marking little trails on their flushed cheeks. The river, ever patient, gurgled past them, as if observing the human spectacle with mild curiosity. Now let's drift a little closer to the boy. He was quiet, more observant than talkative, though the kind of observation that notices the small, almost absurd details. A leaf floating on the water like a tiny boat, a bird wobbling on a distant branch, a drift of foam from the river curling around a submerged root. And there, tucked among the eddies, he saw something strange. Something peculiar enough to demand his attention, which is notable because children, of course, are usually distracted by absolutely nothing of consequence. It was a small wooden box, floating, bobbing, almost apologetically, in the river's gentle current. Not particularly grand, not shimmering, not magical, just a box. It was, in a way, very ordinary, which made it extraordinary. Because sometimes, when the world strips you of nearly everything, even the most mundane object can feel like a lifeline. He reached for it, hands trembling. The water was cold as regret and late autumn mornings. And when he opened it, he found coins. Old coins, tarnished, perhaps forgotten decades ago, now gleaming faintly in the dim afternoon light. But coins alone weren't the remarkable part. No, the remarkable part was the letter tucked beneath them. A simple piece of paper, frayed at the edges, folded again and again until it almost became a cube of whispered hope. The boy handed it to his mother. She unfolded it gently, as though it were glass, as though the paper might shatter if handled carelessly. And then they read. The letter spoke of someone else who had faced calamity, of homes washed away and dreams temporarily drowned. But the writer, a person long gone, had insisted, in careful, looping handwriting, that resilience was always possible. That survival was not merely an act of endurance, but a slow, deliberate art of gathering small bits of hope, polishing them, and tucking them into the pockets of your heart. Keep moving forward, it read, because even rivers, though they wash away your walls, cannot touch the walls you build within yourself. And of course, the mother's eyes softened. The father's jaw, taut from guilt, relaxed just enough to allow a tiny breath of relief. The children, who had stared at the river with wide, hollow eyes, began to imagine small futures. Rebuilding, collecting sticks and stones to form new walls, planting seeds along the riverbank, and perhaps eventually laughing again. Because children are like that. They accept miracles quietly, without ceremony, and in doing so, they remind adults how miraculous life can be, even when circumstances are undeniably bleak. Let's pause for a moment. Let the river's gentle murmuring carry your thoughts away. Imagine the box floating slightly downstream, rocking in the current, the coins glinting faintly, catching flecks of sunlight in a world otherwise overcast. Notice how the family sits together, their shoulders brushing, the mother's hand resting on the girl's head, the father's arm cautiously encircling the boy. Notice the quiet. It's soft, it's understated, but it is infinitely more powerful than the river's roar because it's human, and humans, ordinary, resilient humans, can endure far more than we often give them credit for. Naturally, life does not pause. The river will continue to flow. The wind will continue to move leaves in imperceptible waves. But in that small space beneath the tree, something extraordinary is happening. Courage is growing. Not the loud, brash courage of heroes in stories. No, this is a soft, almost imperceptible courage, the kind that builds silently in the mind when hope is scarce. And it is perhaps the most reliable kind, because it does not demand recognition, applause, or reward. It simply is, quietly insisting, try again, begin again. One small step is enough. Of course, you might think, a letter and a few coins will hardly change anything. And naturally, you'd be right if only one looked at material worth. But what the letter offers is not coins, not wealth, not even instructions on survival. It offers perspective. It whispers a subtle, almost wry reminder that suffering is temporary, that disasters are inconvenient but not necessarily final, and that humanity has always found ways to reclaim dignity, even after the worst of times. As the afternoon stretches toward evening, the family rises slowly. The father tests his legs, stiff from hours of sitting on damp soil. The mother gathers her children close. The boy clutches the wooden box as if it were the crown of a minor kingdom, which, in a way, it is. And together, they begin the first tentative steps toward rebuilding. Not hurriedly, not with brash confidence, but steadily. With hands intertwined, they follow the riverbank, scanning for dry patches of earth, potential places for shelter, maybe a small fire to cook their meager meal. It is in this quiet procession that the real lesson emerges. Not the disaster, not the flood, not even the coins and the letter, but the act of moving forward, step by step, breath by breath, because when the world is reduced to river, mud, and lost possessions, it is the simple act of standing, of walking, of gathering together that constitutes true courage. And that is something no flood can take away. So let's drift here for a while. Imagine the soft, wet smell of the river, the cool breeze brushing against faces tired from tears. Hear the mother whisper again, almost to herself, almost to the universe, "We will be all right." Hear the children echo, uncertain but hopeful, "We will be all right." And notice how the father, who has blamed himself so long, allows a tiny, almost imperceptible smile. Because sometimes, after a day like this, a smile is not frivolous. It is the first brick in the new walls they will build, inside and out. The sun lowers, shadows lengthen, the river murmurs its steady rhythm. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a family that lost almost everything begins to understand something profound. Life, like the river, flows relentlessly, but so does hope, quietly, persistently, beneath the surface, waiting to be noticed, ready to be grasped.